Popped in and popped out. All right, folks, we've got another great show here on IBM.TV. It's the radio show with Marc Lee, and I'm glad to see that I've got some tremendous guests that are here already, ready to join the party and see what's going on and all of that. So I am going to bring on my various guests who have actually come and joined us. And like I said, we're going to have a very exciting conversation about a number of things going on around the world. So definitely look forward to having a conversation with a number of my great guests that'll be here with me for a number of hours and everything. So definitely looking forward to having a great conversation and seeing what folks are involved in and doing in their lives right now. So like I said, we've had a number of things that have been going on. Of course, we are in the middle of election season, and right here in Durham, early voting started as recently as last week, and that'll be going to the 31st. So it actually started on the 15th, and it'll be going until the 31st. So that's what's going on here in terms of the elections. And I understand that Mr. Biden was in town over the weekend. It was a select group of folks that were actually able to check him out, but they were definitely having that event go on in Durham. And I know a number of folks are also going to be paying attention to the political campaign and the next debate. That's right. We've got another debate coming up and all of that. And of course, folks have been paying attention to the world of sports and how the sports world is going, because I know we just had the World Series set. So that's going to be the Los Angeles Dodgers against the Tampa Bay Rays. And of course, the Tampa Bay Rays do have as their home team, they are the parent team, I should say, of the Durham Bulls. Unfortunately, the Durham Bulls did not play this year, as minor league baseball was pretty much called off because of COVID and all that's been going on in the world. So that did not happen. And then, of course, in the NBA, we did have the Lakers win that championship and a number of other things. I believe it was Tampa Bay that won in hockey. So we've had a number of things going on in the sports world. And right now I'm going to bring in my good friend Errol Reese. And like I said, I've also got Damon Brown that I'll be bringing in as well. But right now we're going to see what Errol's got to say about the sports world and all of that. So I'm bringing him in. How's it going, Errol? How's it going?
It's going great. Mark, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Glad to see that everything's going well. Like I was saying, I was talking a little bit about the sports that's going on, and I know that you are definitely a sports person, been involved with the sports shop for a while, definitely one of the leading entrepreneurs in this area as far as I'm concerned. So I would love for you to talk about the sports shop and just how you think sports is doing in this era, because we are in the COVID era, and of course that has impacted the way that sports are being done. I was actually watching the baseball game yesterday between the Dodgers and the Braves, and I did see that we had fans out in baseball. I know there were not that many fans in the basketball championships, but the baseball did go that route of having fans. So I was just wondering how you're dealing with sports in this era, because like I said, this is a whole new era that we're in with COVID and everything, but I know that sports is one of your passions.
Yeah, well, first of all, Mark, thanks so much for having me on. I really do appreciate it. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, hear you loud and clear.
Okay. It's funny. You're right. We've been doing this sports shop radio show thing or podcast and everything else for about 8 years, believe it or not. We start off on weekends, and now we're doing morning drive every weekday morning from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. on Buzz Sports Radio, which is owned by Capital Broadcaster. And you mentioned the Tampa Bay Rays in the World Series. Capital Broadcaster obviously is involved with them because they own the Durham Bulls, which is the minor league team to the Tampa Bay Rays. So a lot of guys that's on that team have probably come through Durham at some point, right?
Right.
They know about 147 and all that. So, but I'm somewhat a Dodger fan, so I'm gonna be kind of torn a little bit. But great series, the Braves series and the Dodgers was a great series. And you mentioned, Mark, that we're so happy to have sports back. And at one point, it was almost too much. We went so long without having sports. Then, like a couple of weeks or so, with the NBA on, and of course the NFL coming back, college football starting up. They was finishing up hockey. Man, we was about to go. It was just too much, in my business. So be careful what you ask for. But I think shout out to Adam Silver and how he handled the NBA. I mean, if you think about it, they was there, for several months, and zero person, contracted the COVID-19. virus, which is amazing if you think about that. So it goes to show you. Of course, it had to be a bubble situation, but the NBA, some reason, they always gets it right. If you remember, Mark, I was down in Greensboro back in March, get ready to walk into the ACC, Greensboro Coliseum for the ACC. And, of course, a couple of days before then, the NBA said they were going to shut it down because of the situation with Utah Jazz, with Gobert and another guy. Gobert actually had the virus. I was walking to the Greensboro Coliseum, and Commissioner Swafford called a meeting and shut the whole ACC tournament down. So the NBA has always been leading the effort for all these type of major decisions. So they led the effort. Then of course everybody subsequently shut down their season. Then the NCAA was pretty much put on the shelf. But the NBA has led the forefront. They led the forefront, obviously, with what's going on with social injustice and all that ridiculous things that are going on in America right now. And, of course, NFL's coming back. My Alabama Crimson Tide is winning. So all is right in the world with me, Mark. I'm so happy right now what's going on with sports.
I know that's right. And there's also college sports that is going on. I know we've got some college football, but a couple of the leagues did pull their season abbreviated seasons or things of that nature. So how are you feeling about the way that college football is going and the way that that's working? Because I do know that there have been changes even in the way that that's going. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about how college football is handling the situation.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they actually started and looks like they're going to finish, because I said they may start, but they're not going to finish. And so I'm surprised by that, which is a good thing, I guess. But what I don't like, Mark, is you got the Pac-10, Pac-12 hanging out there trying to figure it out. The Big Ten made a big-time mistake. The commissioner there by shutting everything down before they knew all the information. So now they're coming back for the first time this weekend, the Big Ten. Hell, some of these teams, SEC, ACC, these guys only 5th and 6th games. Then the Pac-12 is not coming back until November. So how are you going to pick a true winner? Is it going to be fair? Say, for example, if a Pac-12 team comes and plays about 8 games and they're undefeated, do they qualify for a playoff versus another team that's played 10 games or sometimes 11 games? So it's been up in the air, but I'm glad to see college football this year. I just wish everybody would have started at the same time so we won't have any discrepancy in terms of the value of their conference, because they only play less, X amount of games versus another conference that played almost a full schedule.
Yep, and I definitely want to bring in some of our other guests as well. But before we get to that, I'd love to hear from you, Errol, as if you could tell folks how you got involved in the sports world. Like I said, I know that you've been involved in it, as you just mentioned, for a number of years, but I'm sure that our listeners from around the world would like to hear what brought you into doing this sports announcing and what got you involved in sports.
Well, Larry, as you know, I've been in Durham for a while. I'm a IT guy. I came to Durham to work for IBM, actually. And then, of course, I became an entrepreneur working in the tech field. But I played sports in college, so I was always involved in sports. Mark, you remember the NC program that we had at North Carolina Central that was so popular that involved former NBA players and college players and high school players. Well, I was involved with that, and I worked with Jerry Stackhouse. And then, of course, I was handling the media for that whole event. And as a result of doing that, I got approached by a couple of radio stations about coming on that show, like you asked me. I came on. Then one day later, asked me could I co-host the show over in I think it was Linda Caldwell over in Durham, and then of course I was on that for a couple of months. Then because I knew some people, I knew George Haber, who runs Capital Broadcasting. I knew a lot of people over Capital Broadcasting. I approached them about bringing some flavor to their family of stations. I said, you have a lot of people that play football and basketball that look like me, but you don't have a lot of people that talks about football and basketball on the radio that look like me. So that's how I got the opportunity.
Sounds great. And definitely, I know you've been involved in entrepreneurship, and I want to bring in Damon to the conversation as well. Damon has definitely been involved a lot in entrepreneurship and has definitely been talking about folks in that gig economy. I met him through our mutual buddy, Shree, and things along that line. Right. So definitely did some great jobs in that. But I would love to hear you talk about what is going on in the entrepreneurship world, because I know you've been involved in a number of things. You've actually got a test that folks can take about their entrepreneurship. I took that test and found out that I was agile. So
you're agile.
I was agile. So I want to learn about the different things that go on, but agile is what comes up, and that was the definition that was given to me. So definitely tell us a little bit about yourself and also about the gig economy, because like I said, the gig economy is definitely been used a lot in this society. I know that even Errol has seen a lot of his friends and me as well that are doing gig jobs, whether that's DoorDash, whether that's Uber or a number of other things. So definitely I'd love to hear you talk about how that's impacting our current society in this world that we're living in.
Right. Nice to connect with you too. I'm glad you didn't ask me about sports, because I can tell you about esports. That's about it. But
there you go. That's good stuff too. Yeah.
Right. That's my generation I grew up with. So my name is Damon Brown, and my main focus is helping what I call non-traditional entrepreneurs. So they're the side hustlers, the solopreneurs. They're the people who are underestimated, people who are overlooked, people who are underfunded, those folks. And I know that because I'm one of them. And so I became an entrepreneur at the same time that I had my first child. And I was and have been the primary caretaker of now my 2 children. So had a baby, my wife went back to work, and then I became an entrepreneur. And Errol, you know about entrepreneurship, so it's like
absolutely,
yeah, you know the deal. It's like so you gotta, I got a baby in one hand, and then you're trying to start a company in another.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I ended up doing 2 companies. I bootstrapped both of them. The second one was called Cuddler, which connected people for hugs. And so if you're familiar with Tinder, Grindr, kind of the younger generations hookup apps, we did that, but for platonic relationships. Well, so if you really need a hug, this is back in 2014. So if you really need a hug, or if you want to connect with people, you can go and swipe right and go with that. We got really popular around the time that my son turned 1. And we're on the cover of the Wall Street Journal, cover of the New York Times, had 100,000 users that first week. We ended up getting to 250,000 by the time the year was done. Ended up getting acquired about 11 months into it. And my son was just turning 2. And so that inspired me to say, okay, I'm African-American, male. I don't live in Silicon Valley. I bootstrapped the whole thing, with my co-founders. I'm a loyal husband, and I'm a primary caretaker of my little black boy. And it's like, where maybe I'm the new blueprint for what's supposed to happen. You know what I mean? It's like, I lived in Silicon Valley before, and it was the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Elon Musk and the Jeff Bezos. Respect to them. I know some of them. So they're cool. It's just, there's another generation, a different type of entrepreneur that's coming up now. And I realized that I wasn't an anomaly, but I was more and the energy of where we're going to go next. So I've dedicated for the past 7 years focusing on the multiple TED Talks I've done, the books that I've done, the one-on-one coaching that I do, the speaking, connecting, just like I'm doing with y'all now, is kind of raising that group up and saying, okay, this is how you can do it. And so what Mark was referring to is my new book coming out in January. It's called Build From Now: How to Know Your Power, See Your Abundance, and Nourish the World. And the argument is that we all have the power to transform the world, no matter what our station in life is. And that's based on the 4 different resources each one of us has. So we have focus. So you can be hyper-focused. You can be agile, which Mark referred to. So that means you can roll with the punches, dodge things, move really quickly. That's really big. As you know, in entrepreneurship community, agile development. You can have a whole lot of time. And so people are dealing with that with the pandemic. I have 2 little kids. I don't have a whole lot of time, but a lot of people have a lot of time if they live alone or if they're retired or whatever, and they have all this time on their hands. And so what can you do with that time if it's in abundance? And lastly, you have your energy. And so in general, the younger you are, the more energy you have. But maybe you don't have as many commitments right now, you have more energy. And so depending on where you are personally and professionally, your resources vary. And so what I wanted to really do, I had a couple best-selling business books that I had done, and they were very much about setting up the framework. And I think the biggest challenge that we have is that the business books today, the coaching that we end up doing, it ends up saying, you are broken. You're doing something wrong. you're being lazy. You need to get off your behind and get it. You need to hustle. You need to grind. No one's going to give you anything, particularly within the underfunded communities, the diverse communities, whether it's the people of color or the LGBTQ community. Like, there's that energy where it's like not looking at the systems and the challenges that we happen to face if we are part of the minority or the different communities. My whole thing is to take that on its head and say, listen, like, there are systematic things that we have challenges with right now. There are people who will discount you just because of who you are and your background and your culture. That creates a level of friction that other people don't necessarily have. Yeah. So for us to say my previous book was called Bring Your Worth. So to say that you can bring your worth to any situation, to say that you can create something out of nothing, you have to acknowledge that there are systematic issues that make it different than it might be for someone else.
Sure.
And what I'm trying to do with the book, right? So what I'm trying to do with Build From Now is set up this free quiz that I just launched. Mark was one of the first people to do it, so I want to give him the exclusive. And basically, you go in there, you answer 3 simple questions, and then you know exactly where your particular resource is. My resources right now is focus. I am hyper-focused. And so I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I'm finishing a book manuscript, and I'm talking to y'all and getting this stuff done. I don't have a whole lot of energy because, I got kids. I don't have a lot of time because I got kids. And agility is a little bit rough because I have to jump all over the place. But I am hyper-focused. And so the book really says, if you're hyper-focused, this is how you can bring the best out of it. So instead of saying, this is how you're broken, we're basically saying, this is how you have your superpower and your strength. Let's maximize that and work with whatever we've got. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sounds good. I want to bring in some of our other guests as well. But one of the things I was going to ask you really quickly was definitely along those same lines is I've heard a lot of folks, including some of the founders of IBM.TV, that have talked about the nature of, even in our political situation, that we're seeing a lot of people that are putting out a lot of issues. And you mentioned the LGBT community, definitely Black Lives Matter, a number of other things, but they're wondering if we're not focusing enough on policy. So they're wondering if we actually have like a game plan and things of that nature. So I know that that's something that Kim Calhoun has brought up and things along that line. So I was wondering if both of you could address that, if you think that we're doing enough in terms of whether we're actually creating a plan when we're talking about all these different issues, whether that's issues around the LGBT community, whether that's Black Lives Matter, whether that's a number of the other groups that are out there. But I know that one of the things that Kim oftentimes talks about is that she wishes that there would be more of a focus on policy. And it seems to me that's even something that you're arguing as well, Damon, and everything. So I'd love to hear from both of you, Errol and Damon. So I'll let you go first, Errol, and then I'll hear from Damon. And then I want to bring in Louisa Garrett into the conversation as well and see what she's all about. And then I've got one other person that I'll be bringing in as well.
Thank you, Mark. I always said that, and we're definitely in this season of political season of voting and things of that nature. And people talk about, who should they vote for and things of that nature. But because they won't make a change. But I've been of the opinion that policy make changes. If you have to be at the table to change policy, then you can make a difference. And when people focus on that, don't get caught up in the minutia of this person, that person. But if you really want to make a change, you change policy or try to convince people who have that level of power to make that change to do that. So whether it relates to Black Lives Matter, all various communities that we all like to support, I think we want to move forward in those arenas. I think it's imperative that we focus on changing policy versus anything else.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What do you have to say about that, Damon? And then, like I said, I want to bring Louisa into the conversation as well.
Yeah, I think policy is a really big part of it. And I think we kind of have to hit it from 2 angles. And so the first angle is getting into the room, as you kind of hinted at, and getting a seat at the table. So I feel like that we're hitting one angle from there. And then a lot of the, I guess in the political standpoint, I would be considered grassroots. But a lot of the work that I'm doing is from the other direction to say, let's go ahead and build our own table to the point where we can't be ignored, And so it's kind of this tough thing, bringing back to entrepreneurship, which again, I know you're familiar with, where you're kind of waiting for a venture capitalist to recognize your beauty. You know where I'm going, right?
Very good example. That's a great example right there. That's a great example right there. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like, but I bootstrapped both of my companies, and the people said, "Oh no, this is the next wave. This is the thing." And so a lot of the people that I'm trying to inspire and coach are trying to get to that level to say, this is a toolbox. Here's the game. And so I think we can kind of, for lack of a better term, attack it from both sides. I think we're both right. Where it's like the people that can't get a seat at the table, like I've spoken at the TED conference. A lot of people haven't done that.
Right.
So in that sense, metaphorically, that's like a seat at the table. So there's influence in ways that I can move the culture that a lot of people can't. But at the same time, it's like I bootstrapped the company, and that's totally grassroots, not waiting for anybody to change policy or trying to get into those rooms. So I think we kind of have to do both. And I think it's a matter of people figuring out, again, what their strengths are, and then trying to move the culture that way.
Sounds good. Louisa Garrett, I'd love to have you talk about what you've got going on and bring you into the conversation. Because like I said, I've invited a number of folks that I thought would definitely be involved in giving us lots of dialogue about what's going on. I've also got a musician that I'll be bringing in as well. But I'd love to hear what you've got going on. And definitely if you could share with our listeners who are a global community about what's going on in your world.
Yes, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. And it's been a pleasure to listen to Errol and Damon. You guys are dropping knowledge. I love it. And so I just am a published author in a book called Love Meets Life. And it's a book about unexpected stories of love showing up during 2020. And it's not like the toxic positivity. It's real life stories about how people show up in their life in unexpected ways when life hits you hard with a blunt object to the back of the head sometimes. And so how do you move forward when you've been hit on the back of the head? Like, do you stay down? Or when you get up, then what happens next? And so that is, what I'm doing, what I've just done. And my company is called Make Kind Loud. And basically it is what it says, is that my mission in life for the rest of the time that I'm here is to make kind loud as possible, because there's negativity all around us, right? It shouts, it screams, it's at the forefront, but there's also a lot of good stuff that's happening in the world. A lot of good is happening, but it doesn't get as noticed because it's not shouting like that negativity. So my goal is to make kind loud so that people understand that it's okay to be kind, and it's okay to share that with the world and not just sit back and allow the negativity that's happening around us.
Definitely, you bring some good points, and I want to come back to both Damon as well as Errol about that, because I agree with what Louisa is saying, that there's a number of negative comments that go on, and sometimes we allow the loud and the negative to get too loud. One of the arguments that I made earlier, and one of the things I'm glad to see, and I would actually use our mutual friend Damon Shree as an example of this. But if you remember the earlier days of talk radio, there was folks like Rush Limbaugh and a number of others that were very loud and very, in my mind, very wrong, but they were very loud. But they was not enough of the progressive community that did that kind of work of actually putting their voice out as well. At least that's my opinion. But I think that with StreamYard and with a number of other platforms that are out there now, we're seeing at least the progressive side that's being also making their noise as well. So I think that while we still have some of the negative voices that are going, and I think that just my own personal opinion, that person at 1600 tweets too much, but that's just my own personal opinion. But I think that despite that, we still have a number of other folks that are able to put their voice out as well. So what do you think about that, Damon? And also I'll get to Errol as well, but I'd love to hear from Damon first as to your reflections on that.
No, I agree 100%. That's one of the things that I expose. That's one of the patterns in the work that I do, whether it's coaching or keynotes or doing the books, is similar to what Louisa talked about. You have the ability to really connect with the people that you want to serve. And that's something that's unique. I have 2 degrees in journalism, and I study at Northwestern, and all, under the old dogs in the old Chicago newsrooms. Like, I knew a lot of them, and so I'm at that age where I learned how to type. I learned how to typeset. I remember that last gasp of the newspapers back about 2-3 decades ago. So I know that, and then moving towards the digital age. And so I've been able to see firsthand, which I'm really like grateful for, to be able to see firsthand what you're talking about, Mark, where we didn't have this kind of influencer power. You could send a letter to the editor and maybe they'd print it. That was about it. You know what I mean? And now it's totally changed. Like, Mark, you have your own show. If I want to do my own keynote or talk every single day, I can do that. But most of you know, like the game wasn't like that before.
Yeah.
And so we kind of have to wake people up, like all of you are doing, wake people up and say, okay, you don't have to wait for CBS to pick up your show. How about you just start a talk show? As our buddy Shree has done, as many of our mutual friends have done. So I find it really empowering and exciting, but we have to recognize our own power first,
And I was going to add that one of the things, and this is another one here, like I said, from Errol as well, but you alluded to it earlier. I think that we're seeing our athletes also exuding their power as well. I mean, you talked about the way that they were definitely highlighting Black Lives Matter, things of that nature, whether it was LeBron, whether it was Doc Rivers, who was actually a schoolmate of mine from Marquette that made some statements during that time and is now a member of the coaching staff of the Philadelphia 76ers. But I think that we saw a lot more of that, even from our athletes and our entertainers, where they're actually using their voice. And yes, they might have done that before in the 60s and some other eras, but I'm actually seeing them do it even stronger now. Would you agree with that?
It's just one quick comment. If you think about the meeting at the summit back in the day in the 60s with, at that time, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Jim Brown, Rick Chamberlain, those guys, man. Not Rick Chamberlain, Bill Russell. It was just phenomenal. They think about that and just fast forward up to now. They had a platform. They were supporting Muhammad Ali's decision not go fight in the war. And the power that was in that room, multiply that by a factor of 1,000. And with LeBron and, of course, Dwayne Wade and Carmelo and all those guys, the NBA as a whole, they are taking the bull by the horn. And I think what you're seeing is guys been independently focused, but collectively driven as an NBA, and I applaud those guys. But I love because they first of all they have the money to do it, they have the crowd sourcing to do it, the people that's following them, which is impactful, and it makes a difference, man. And you're gonna see it. It's making a difference now, and it's gonna make a difference as we move forward. So I just want to throw that in there a little bit, Mark.
Yeah, and one of the things I was going to add to that, and I was curious to hear from all three of you, and then I'm going to bring in my rapper friend as well. But the other thing that I was going to ask is, one of the things that I've heard a criticism of is that while they have made their voice heard in terms of these issues, some people feel that they haven't done enough in terms of economic impact. Like, we don't have necessarily the distribution wings. We don't necessarily have enough ownership in the league and things of that nature. So while they're making all of that money, the criticism is that they're not using that money to pool their resources and to create enough of like actual true economic power. So I would love to hear you talk about that, Errol, and then also hear from Damon what his thoughts are on that as well. Because I do know that that's the one criticism I've heard of our athletes, is that they aren't doing enough to do enough economic development.
Well, it's kind of like this polling sometimes. You hear certain polls, and I'm like, nobody called me to ask for my opinion. Just like nobody called me to ask for my opinion about, what these guys are doing. Like, and they are doing things. Some things take baby steps, but as Damon mentioned, some of them, are at the table. Some are creating their own table. And I think going forward, you're going to see LeBron. And the other part that's not mentioned, I'll shut up after this one, they're creating opportunities for other people to be leaders economically in the community. When you create schools for people who wouldn't have that capability with LeBron and Jalen Rose, people like that. So you may not see it now as we speak, but taking baby steps going forward, you're going to see the positive impact of the work they put in or they're putting in right now.
Definitely, I can agree with that. Damon, I'd love to hear some more of your comments on that and everything, because like I said, that's just one of the criticism that I heard, and I know you probably also heard it out in the community where you are, but I'd love to hear what your reflections are.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people always want more. And so what we don't always understand is that people do all kinds of things behind the scenes, and a lot of that's coming to light. Whether it's like with Chadwick Boseman, the young man that just passed away that played Black Panther, among a multitude of different things. He was dealing with all this stuff, supporting all these people, giving his time. And the main thing he got online was criticism because of his appearance. And it breaks my heart to this day. I'm like, how can you judge him? And then he's dealing with this battle. And so we don't know. I'm actually in the middle. I said I'm not too much into sports, but I do love sports documentaries. And I'm in the middle of watching The Last Dance. Which I'm sure most of y'all have seen like a million times. Again, I have little kids, so I'm just starting to watch it now. It came out like a year ago. I'm catching up on like the social media discussion about it. But briefly, with Scottie Pippen, he ended up getting a contract that was well below what he's supposed to be getting for being the number 2 man, probably in the league at the time.
Yeah.
But he said, I got 9 brothers and sisters back in Arkansas, I think.
Arkansas, sure.
Was that right? Right. So back in Arkansas, he's like, so I can't play this game. And so I think that's the part that people don't understand. Like, I have good family members, close family members that are from the inner city. My folks are from the inner city, over on the East Coast. So if you end up coming up on that level, and people are saying you should start your own NBA league, it's like, well, no, I'm trying to get my kids and my family out of poverty. Like, I'm not on that level yet. And I talk about that in the new book, Build From Now, as well as my latest TED Talk, is that we have to factor in what we're unwinding from the past. So I'm the first person in my family to have a graduate degree. Like, I have friends of different persuasions who they're like the 3rd or 4th person in their family. Their great grandmother had a graduate degree. So there's a certain amount of unwinding that we're doing of the past, particularly if we're a person of color or part of the minority communities. We have to factor all that in there. So we can't just say you got a $20 million contract. It's like, well, by the time you take it home, you really have 10 because you got agents, you got taxes. Again, Errol, you probably know this better than I do. Yep. So you got the numbers. You probably got like 8 million out of that 20. And then you got to buy your mama a house. And then you have to get your cousin out of jail and all this stuff. And you're on TV and you're expected to have a certain lifestyle. And it's like all those things, they just are trying to get it together. And they don't have the financial education.
Right.
So there's so many different levels. I could talk on and on about it, but there's so many things where you can't really judge people based on what you think they have. And you can't judge people on how far you think they should go, particularly if you've never been in that situation. Now, if, Kobe, rest in peace, said something critical about LeBron, fine. But I've never been an NBA player. I don't know what the pressures are. So there's a lot of dialogue that's happening about other people where we're not really putting a microscope on ourselves and what we can build from this certain point. I mean, I'm sure you can relate to that as far as a level of negativity and people talking about what other people should do, but they're not, again, building from now based on whatever resources they have. You maximize that, then you have the opportunity to maybe talk about other people.
Yeah. And if I could just jump in, Mark, I want to piggyback on both Errol and Damon. I wholeheartedly agree. They want to point the fingers and say, well, what are you doing? Why aren't you putting your money behind that? But yet they have no idea what these people are actually doing. And they have a platform where they can use their voice to say, this is how I feel. This is the stance I want to take. And they have every right to do that. I get so offended for them when people say, just shut up and play, right? Well, they are humans, right? They are humans. They have their own voice. They have their own passions, and they have a right to voice their voice, and they have a right to say what they want to say and be a force to be reckoned with. But yet they get so much negativity. They get so much backlash for being human, and it's unfair. Yeah, LeBron is at this moment probably the greatest basketball player in our time. I get that. He has millions and millions of dollars, but he has also built a school. He also has a family. He's also doing stuff for his mom. He's also putting his stuff out there every single day. And he's a faithful husband who with his high school sweetheart for years. He doesn't get credit for any of that. And don't get me wrong, Michael Jordan is still the greatest basketball player of all time.
Okay, we good again. Okay.
However,
I was waiting for it.
Right.
I was waiting.
Yes. However, LeBron James is a man who is standing up on his money and putting it out there. And to say that, well, you're not doing this is unfair. It's unfair and it's unkind, really.
Yeah.
Well, Louisa, I want to jump in. Just you mentioned money with LeBron. I think collectively with his money and his partnerships with corporations,
right?
Since the school has been built, I think they're around $48 million that's been contributed to that school for those kids.
Wow,
unbelievable!
Right, which is amazing. Which is absolutely
very amazing. And one of the things I was going to ask, and you actually talked about one of those athletes that made a statement and then kind of got blacklisted. So I'm actually going to go there. So Errol, what do you think about the whole situation with Colin and everything of that nature? And will he ever get back to playing, or is his playing days done? Because he was actually the first one that really got us into the whole Black Lives Matter movement and everything. And then, like I said, they kind of like shunned him off in the NFL. So like I said, do you think that we'll ever see Colin have a playing day, or was that a case of somebody that spoke too much and then is now facing the consequences?
Well, definitely, he didn't speak that much. Obviously, how's you looking right now, given what's going on in the world? Based on how's he been looking? How's he been looking since he protested? Nothing's changed. I mean, unfortunately, something may happen tomorrow that's similar to some of the things he was complaining about. I mean, George Floyd, that didn't happen when he was out there. Breonna Taylor, that didn't happen when he was. I mean, it was 7 years ago. He was right then, and he's right now. And let me tell you, a guy who I had a chance to interview a couple of times. He is so committed about what he's trying to do. And to answer the question, no, I don't think he's going to play again. But you know what? He's going to be remembered better based on what he's doing off the field than what he's doing on the field. So I'm good with that.
For sure.
Yeah, I agree with you on that and everything. I want to come back to Louisa, and it's something else that both of you brought up, and then I'm going to bring in, like I said, the rapper that I've got as well. So I'm bringing him into the conversation so he can talk about some of the things that he's got going on and all of that. But I wanted to hear from all of you, including, and then I want to bring in the rapper to the conversation, but definitely to the three that have been on so far, I'd love to hear what y'all have to think about the way education is going, because that's another thing that I know I'm very passionate about is education. And I think that a lot of times I know one of the things that our the same director that I was talking about, that's one of the founders, Kim, talks about is that she feels that we're actually in a 20th or 21st century world, but still an 18th century education system. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are as to whether we're doing enough to bring our education system to where it should be. So I'll start with you, Miss Garrett, and then I'll come up to Damon, and then go up to Errol, and then bring in my young fella as well, who's involved in the music business. But I'll start with you, Miss Garrett.
Thank you. No, I don't think we're doing enough. And I think, unfortunately, we're so focused on test results that we're not teaching these kids. And there's so much more to school. There's so much more to education than just the standardized tests. Are those important? Yes, but they're not the entire thing. And I have 24 nieces and nephews. I don't have any kids of my own, but I have 24 nieces and nephews. And yeah.
Wow.
And 13 of those nieces and nephews are still school aged, right? And so when I talk to them about school, they tell me about, well, we're studying for the test and we're doing this. I was like, well, what'd you learn today? Well, today we focused on the test. It's nothing about learning. It's all about being focused on these tests, which in turn is about the money. Because if they don't pass these tests, they don't get money for whatever. So I think we are education is being sold at a price that is not beneficial to our kids. Our kids are so creative and they're so willing to soak up information if they're allowed to do that. But they're being bombarded with test results and test scores and this, that, and the other. The education, the true education, has been put on a back burner, and that is such a disservice to our kids.
I would agree with you on that. Damon, what do you got to say about that? And then I'm going to come to Errol as well. And the other thing I was going to add to that is I sometimes feel that one of the things that we're not teaching folks, and I know that's one of the platforms that IBM.TV uses, is actually teaching about entrepreneurship and financial freedom. So I know that there are a number of folks that are right now involved in what's going on in the economy, and a lot of us are facing the hardships, trying to make ends meet and things of that nature. And I don't know that I know a lot of the adults aren't able to deal with it. So I know that the kids that are coming out of college probably also won't be able to deal with it. So I would love to hear what your thoughts are about education, but particularly education as it relates to entrepreneurship and financial planning.
Sure. I mean, the nice thing is that when you leave college, at least when I did, I was broke anyway. So it kind of I finished grad school when the dot-com bubble burst. And so it's like I went into it and it was like a train wreck. So I have sympathy for the folks that are coming out of college now. I have a lot of thoughts on this. I think the short version is that we can't depend on systems to educate our children. That's kind of the short version of it. That doesn't mean that college doesn't have a place. I've done teaching. That doesn't mean teachers don't have a place. What it means is that we have the responsibility, particularly, again, people of color, people in the LGBTQ community, whatever communities that might not be recognized within the bigger systems, it's our responsibility at the end of the day to figure out where our kids are supposed to go. My wife and I have put together like money and saved things towards both of our kids going to college. But we also made it flexible enough to know that, 11 years from now, college might not exist. Now, those discussions were already happening. If you watch the TED Talks with Sir Ken Blanchard and other folks, or Sir Ken, I forget his last name, but it's Sir Ken. It's one of the most popular TED Talks of all time. But he talks about how the school system was broken. That was 10 years ago. The coronavirus has just sped that up. And so I remember having conversations with my wife about college when we first had our son years ago. And I was like, I don't know if that's going to happen 18 years from now. Let's put it aside, but what have you. So taking it lower into the lower grades, I think we need to take a step back and say, what exactly is the purpose of school? If the purpose of school is to keep people inspired, to help them understand why they are on this earth, and to make a living, beyond making a living, and uplift themselves and their community, then the way we have the school system isn't built for that. And so it needs to be extra stuff. Again, I'm the primary caretaker of my two sons. So reading to them every day, they're in the audience when I'm doing my TED Talks, the whole thing. That's the real education to me. Them getting their diplomas. And remember, I have my master's, so it's not like I'm, against school. It's just that era that I was in where it's like you need to have a college degree. Yeah. And, especially being a black boy, it's like, go and get your grad degree. I got it at 22. I was not messing around. I got it. And then I realized, wait, hold on a second. I have this great network. I paid a lot of money for it, but I have this great network. And now if I was a 22-year-old, I'd be like, well, why don't I just go ahead and start my own magazine online? Why don't I start my own YouTube channel? The stuff that I could do now, the stuff that I'm doing now, I could have done back then straight out the gate. And so the question is, I think ultimately the people who are the gatekeepers, as you referred to earlier, Errol, the people who are making the decisions at the table, yes. Do they care whether you have a degree or not? Right. I think that's kind of the bottom line. And if they don't care, then do your business. Someone I just quoted recently on my Instagram, they said the best resume you can have is a finished product. Mm-hmm. So if you show you can do it, and I'm sure that Mr. Joe can attest to this, the more you show you can do it, the more record labels or whomever you're trying to get a cosign for will recognize you versus you getting a specific degree in something and paying money for that. Why don't you do your thing and actually make money based on it? So those are my thoughts on it. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Errol, I want to hear yours as well. And the other thing I was going to add to your thoughts and everything is that as you're thinking about how you're going to address this is I also don't feel that we do enough in terms of even addressing physical education and sports as well. I know that definitely on the high school level and other levels that their sports teams exist, but in terms of like actually training ourselves in terms of like learning about nutrition, learning about health habits and things of that nature, I don't think that we do enough of that in the schools either. So I was wondering your thoughts of whether you would agree with me on that, or do you think that we could do a better job?
I got a lot of thoughts on that. But my daughters, when they was younger, I couldn't get used to the fact that they was eating cereal without milk. That's how they ate cereal. That's must have been a millennium kind of thing. I have no idea what that was going on, but that was kind of weird. I think in today's society, with the influence of esports and just electronic in general, a lot of kids, as opposed to what we did. I was told to go outside and play. You tell a kid that now, they'll look at you like you don't know what you're talking about. They'll go outside and take their Xbox with them and plug it up to the television or deck or somewhere. But in terms of the physical aspect, I think that still needs to be emphasized. The great, former First Lady Michelle Obama, she was all about that, trying to instill, fitness amongst the youth. And I think that needs to continue. Real quick on the points two quick points on the education thing. First of all, what Louisa said, the fact of the matter is that education is being sold. And it's interesting when you think about that. We train these kids not to go and become this. We're training to understand how to take this test for this. And it's sad. A mom who just retired from school, well, she retired a long time ago, but she just stopped teaching as a substitute teacher, 83 years old. She's been a school teacher all her life, so education has been very, very important to me. She always talked about, and this was what Damon talked about, practical application. What you learn and how you're going to apply that somewhere. What are you going to do with that? You just teaching these kids to take tests. It's nothing to do with putting together some type of mechanical scenario. I know you got to have the math acumen to do some of those things, but in terms of how to do it, we don't see the practical application. So I think that's part of what we are with education. And those are my 2 cents there, Mark.
Yeah, I appreciate that and everything. I do want to bring in SSJ Joker and everything into the conversation so he can share a little bit about what he's got going on, how his music is going, and a little bit about his own journey. And then I would also add, as we're talking about education, his views on education and how we're doing in terms of educating even music and things of that nature. Because I don't think that we train enough folk in music and all of that. But definitely I'd love for you to share with the panel here a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your musical journey, and also reflect on your own thoughts about education as it relates to music education.
Okay, well, thanks for having me on first. And I'm SSG Joke. I'm actually from Atlanta. I'm living in California right now, but I'm from Atlanta. I started rapping when I was about 18. I'm 20 now, so it's been about 2 years. Music has always been kind of an interest to me, but I don't know why it took me a really long time before I decided to, make that jump and actually get into it and start making it myself. But yeah, it's a little about me.
Sounds good. Like you said, you're in California now, but if you would, is it something that you decided that you wanted to get into with the music as a youngster, or were you involved in the church? Because I know a lot of our musicians were involved in the church and things of that nature, or is it something that you became inspired by others? So what actually drew you into the music field, and what are your thoughts about the music field the way it is now?
Well, yeah, it was something that I was inspired by, other artists and stuff like that. I was always into all types of music. I listened to, when I was younger, a lot of old school music. I've listened to alternative rap music. So it's always been something that I've been interested in, and I've loved music. As I grew up, I started getting into a lot more rap music, J. Cole, Lil Wayne, people like that. And when I turned, I think it was 17, there was a rapper named XXXTentacion. And that was like the first rapper that I was really into. I listened to all his music, every time he dropped something, I was always there. And in 2018, he was shot and killed. And that kind of just, I don't know what it was about it, but it kind of just pushed me to where I was like, I need to stop waiting. I've been wanting to do this for a while. I've always been interested in music. I'm going to just start doing this now. Now or never. So it's kind of what got me into it.
Sounds good. Damon, you hear the young entrepreneur talking and things of that nature. What kind of advice would you give to young entrepreneurs like SSG Joker, and who's got his rap name and everything? But what kind of advice would you give to somebody like him that's trying to break into the field from an entrepreneurship standpoint?
Oh, for sure. Number one, where's your music at? Is it on Spotify, or is there a link that?
It's Spotify, SoundCloud, Apple Music, everything.
Put up the link. I want to hear it. So, yeah. So please. I'd say the number one thing, and not just for you, but just in general, is you start with what you've got. Again, that's the meaning behind my new book, Built From Now. Like, start with what you have. That's it. And I'm sorry that it took one of your favorite rappers to pass away a couple of years ago. I remember when he was killed too. And sometimes it does take an external thing to happen. And you're like, wait a second, I don't have all day. Like, and one of the benefits that I had when I was younger, for whatever reason, I always knew that my time was finite. So even when I was your age, I always knew that I wouldn't be around forever. Again, that's why I got my grad degree by the time I was 22. Like, I was like, okay, let's just do it. Let's just get it done. Whatever impact I'm trying to make on the world, it has to happen now. If not now, then I need to start in the direction of it happening. So I'd say that would be the biggest piece of advice I would give to young entrepreneurs. And there's some young entrepreneurs I just talked with at a university a couple of days ago with a keynote. There's some younger folks that I coach. And so I get it, where you might feel like that you need all these resources or a little bit more credibility to move forward, as you hinted at, where you had that energy, but you just didn't get started yet for whatever reason. We sometimes feel as though we have time. Mm-hmm. And the thing is that if you have, if you're spiritual, or, if it's a God calling, or if you're into the universal thing, I've studied a lot of that. So whatever you believe in, whatever your thing is, even if you do not believe in something and you just feel like there's something in your heart, if that's happening, then it's supposed to be delivered to the world, period, point blank. So, I have music in my head, but I don't have it like you do. Like, I'm not a rapper. I used to write about music, but I'm not a rapper. Like, that's just not who I am. But I get words in my head, and I'm publishing my 25th book. There's still more to publish after that. But that's what was given to me. And I've been writing since I was younger than you. And so whatever that is, it's supposed to come out in whatever raw form it is. So that'll be number one. And number two is to understand that whatever you come out with first isn't going to be that great. And so people have talked about how there's a gap between the music or whatever is in your head, in my case, the books, in your head, and what comes out. And when you first start, that gap is really big. You might have a J. Cole verse in your head. And you're like, wow, J. Cole spit that. It'll be amazing. And then you say it, and it sounds awful. That gap is what all of us face. But the more you create and show up every day, the smaller that gap gets. And it gets smaller and smaller. You never get that mastery. Again, I'm doing my 25th book as we speak. I'm still not there yet. So you're not going to get that ever. Just let that go. But the more you show up, the closer you can get to it. And then people will recognize that gift that you have in your head. So I'd say just create, put stuff out. If it sucks, then make another thing and just keep doing it. So that would be the two things I would say. Number one, don't wait. And number two, keep creating. There's no shortcut to it. You're not going to wake up and sound like Tupac one day. Never going to happen. But if you keep creating, then you eventually will have your own type of voice. But you got to flex that muscle. That would be my biggest advice. Yeah.
Yeah, gut and great advice that he gave you and everything. And I will agree with something that Damon said, which is that we need to hear a little bit of your music. So I'm ready to put on No Love. So I've got a copy of that. So if you want to share a little bit about what No Love is all about, then I'll definitely put a little bit of that so that Damon and Errol can hear a little bit of what your sound is all about. And then when we come back, we'll hear what kind of advice Errol and Louisa have for you as well. But I'm going to put that on. So if you got anything that you want to share about No Love before I get ready to hit this shared screen.
Well, like for the hook of No Love, it was basically just like just after I had left college. I'm taking a break from college, and I came to California, and I had been through a breakup, and it was just stuff about how I was feeling at the time, because I like to make music about how I'm feeling at the time, whether it's necessarily just me rapping about love or breakups or stuff like that, or if I just want to rap about nothing and rap about money that I don't have and stuff like that. But
we're going to check out No Love right now.
So, things like that. So No Love was basically just like saying, I can't love. Yeah.
Little baby told me that she love me, so I ran. I can't really be your man. She do wanna run me out my pockets and my band. Turn it to an ocean and I leave her in the sand. This shit ain't go how I planned. Blah, 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 shut up, bitch, damn. She made it come over, I told her that I can't. I'm too busy trying not to fall in love again. Sorry, I can never fall in love again. Whoa, shawty, I ain't playing. Didn't even know what I was seeking fight then. Fuck you all my niggas and you fucking with the clan. I don't want the pussy if it's coming with a fee. Talking shit behind me, but it's coming back to me. I don't want the perkies, nigga, give me all the trees. Beat the pussy up, I got it singing like it's please. I got what you need like Costco. Keep on talking down and I'm a fucking popo. All that talking, but nobody getting dropped, bro. Contemplated what a nigga getting my flow. And RIP the niggas not breathing. Swear the game is losing niggas every season. They done pop my nigga X for no reason. Fuck the pilot that was bitching, that's treason. I got demons, I be fighting in the ring, trying to take my art. All on my own, but a nigga won't start. Trying to fuck another nigga popping out of Kmart. Niggas weird, Eminem's beard. I ain't never showing fear, no my future isn't clear. And she clouded my emotions, but that isn't there here. And I put it on my mama, I won't shed another tear. I had to warm a pussy up and then I took it from the rear. They don't see a nigga popping, they don't see that bitches popping. I ain't showing no emotion when I see a bitch, she dry, but it's alright, alright. Bitch, I glow like a light. We gon' talk, man, or fight. I'm so high out of sight. You a nerd just like Dwight. I want things like I'm white. Girl, you know that I'm right. Why do you wanna fight? Keep a list like I'm light. Try me, bitch, I will write. Yeah. Little baby told me that she love me, so I ran. I can't really be your man. She do wanna run me out my pockets and my band. Turn it to an ocean and I leave her in the sand. This shit ain't go how I planned. Blah, 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 shut up, bitch, damn. She want me to come over, I told her that I can't. I'm too busy trying not to fall in love again. Sorry, I can never fall in love again. Whoa, shawty, I ain't playing. Didn't even know what I was seeking fight then. Fuck you all my niggas and you fucking with the clan.
So, Errol, that was No Love. So what are your thoughts about it?
Oh, you come to me. Well, first of all, SSG, you was feeling some type of way. I'll put it that way when you wrote that song. I'll just put it that way. My own advice to you is, and I think Damon said, no, you may not be the next Tupac, but you don't have to be the first SSG Joker, and just drop from there. And the other part about this, you just get started. I always say my moniker has always been my network is my net worth. So the more people you know, the more people you can plug into what you're trying to do will help you with your goals, moving this project down the road. So just keep working hard and try to be unique. That's important. And then keep it moving. Go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
And what about Louisa? Louisa, definitely I would love to hear your thoughts on the you're all about kindness and things of that nature. So I'd love to hear your reflections as well from the woman's perspective.
Yeah, so I mean the beat's hot. Your tone is hot. I like it. I personally am not a big rap fan. However, I understood exactly where you were coming from. And so I felt you. And, just like Damon said, you just got to keep creating. You got to keep going and doing it. And don't stop because, No Love may be a big hit. It may not. It doesn't matter as long as you just keep on creating and keep on putting that music out. But your voice, the tone and everything, that's hot. So I appreciate all of that. So, yeah.
And I'm going to come back to Damon. Damon's the one that wanted to hear the music, so I gave him a taste of what it's all about.
For sure. Thank you. Yeah. I was just impressed overall with like you having the video and you putting the time and energy into production. The last 7 books I've done have been self-published, and a lot of stuff I do is independent. So, much respect to you from a fellow independent, like creating on that level. I saw at the end you gave a shout out to whomever produced the beat. I don't know if you found them through like a YouTube connection, what have you, or if it's a friend of yours, but that's awesome. Some people can produce their stuff, own stuff. Some people can't. So it's good that like, you're just like, okay, let me get like, a cohort, let me get people in there. I think just keep doing that and keep creating. One thing that I often advice I give to people that I coach is to not quit your day job. And I mean not that in the best way possible, because if you're working at Staples or Best Buy or whatever thing you're doing, and you're able to make a decent living on that, you're able to pay your rent over in LA or whatever, and you're able to do your thing, then you can take that and you're working at Target, they're funding your art. Like people forget about that part of the hustle. People are like, I need to do it full time. That's all I'm going to do. No. You figure out how to maximize the time as a side hustle. And then you have 2, I'm really into income streams. So then you have 2 income streams. You have the check that you're going to get every 2 weeks, maybe some health insurance, things of that nature. You're not worried about that yet, but a little bit later on, it's like that becomes a little bit more of an issue, right? So it's like you got your benefits and all that good stuff. And then you have this side hustle and the bit of streams that you get from YouTube. Once you're able to monetize that, then that's extra pocket money, or you can reinvest that into your business. So I like the direction that you're going with it. Like I can just tell, I can feel it. I'm like, I can tell you're thinking about it, which makes me very, very happy. The only other thing that I would recommend, not even advice, but more as long-term, is that the people that, for lack of a better term, the people that I hustle with now, I met them when I was your age. So my closest friends, the people that I'm collaborating with, people I'm doing business with, people who are designing my books, I met them when I just finished grad school at 21, 22. And so the partnerships that you're building now, they literally can last decades, And so my last book, I'll show it to you. It's called Bring Your Worth. We actually had a single. And so one of my closest friends is a producer, and I speak at TED and other conferences. So he took I talked with him. I was like, we should do something, because he does instrumental beats. So he took my audiobook, and I was like, here you go. Here's an hour-long audiobook. He put a beat behind it. And then when the book came out, we put it on all the major music platforms. You can find it at Bring Your Worth. Just look up Bring Your Worth, the hashtag. And it's like, Purple Fluorite, which is his DJ name, featuring Damon Brown. So we're eating off of that. I have a theme song so that the next time, hopefully in person, I do a keynote, I can come out to my own music. I don't do music. He doesn't write, at least on the level that I do, but we collaborated. I've known him for 2 decades. So that's what I'm saying. So just like I saw you collaborate with that producer, whatever the level is, collaborate with other folks. And then you both can eat, because you both have what people call your zone of genius. Both of you have that. Your genius happens to be the lyrics and the music. Do you understand what I'm saying? So there's a different level that you can get to if you do it with collaboration. And I got my own business. I'm making my own money. I'm still collaborating. So that would be my biggest thing for you to remember. But I mean, I really believe you got it. I could see your wheels are already turning. And so I would just recommend you continue to go in that direction, keep collaborating. Because again, even 2 decades older than you, I'm still collaborating with the folks that I met when I was your age. That says something. You know what I mean?
Collaboration is very important and everything of that nature. Errol, you've been involved in a number of things. Like I said, I definitely know you from Sports Talk and Sports Shop and all of that, but you've done a number of other things as well. So I know that you're about collaboration and about entrepreneurship. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about your entrepreneurship journey as well with Damon, Louisa, and SSG Joker. Because like I said, I've known you to be an entrepreneur, not just involved in the sports world, but also involved in various entrepreneurship businesses as well.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mark, as well. When I moved to the Raleigh area, I moved here to work for IBM. I was executive resource side, but did very, very well. Went to business school, and immediately after I graduated from business school, while working at IBM, I left to start my own company. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I was a software guy. I created my own software that sold that to a lot of government agencies, and then ended up selling that to a local company here. But that allowed me to do some things I really want to do, which at the time was try to connect with people to understand the, if you will, this digital equity position. At the time, it was called digital divide. Now they call it digital equity, right? So I spent the majority of my time trying to make sure people that look like me took advantage of that opportunity, the World Wide Web at the time and all things of that nature. So I was a social entrepreneur in terms of doing that, and was able to make a lot of money by connecting businesses to communities and things of that nature. So I pride myself in doing that, and was awarded definitely doing the Clinton administration, and was involved with him and a lot of guys from his cabinet going around the country talking about digital opportunities, things of that nature. And I brought that to Raleigh, Durham, and along with other nonprofits I chair. So entrepreneurship is this to make money, but you can also share your wealth in terms of your knowledge, and you can gain knowledge that way as well. I think it's twofold. And I love sports, but I think at the end of the day, what I want to hang my hat on is the piece I just talked about. Thank you for the opportunity to allow me to talk about it, Mark.
Oh, no problem. One of the things that I was actually going to ask all of y'all about, and you actually, I'm glad you brought that up, but one of the things that we heard about during this era of what we're going on with COVID and the pandemic is that digital divide. And definitely, I think it does exist. So I'd love to hear from you, Errol, about how we can address that digital divide, because definitely enough of us that are in well-to-do families don't always have the kind of things that we want and everything. So I'd love to hear you talk about the digital divide, then come to Damon and also Louisa. And if SSG Joker's got any thoughts on it as well, we'll come to him. But I'd like to start with you since I know you were involved in that field.
Yeah, this is a really easy one. Right now, I'm working with the Durham Public Schools Foundation, where we're trying to bring digital equity to the Durham area, because in COVID, and it's changing, may change going forward once we figure this out. But a lot of the kids are not even in school. Everything's remote. And a lot of times people think that, everywhere you live and the school system is going to provide the technology for the kids that's at home to engage. That's not always the case. And often the people that are left out are people that look like us. You try to ask a kid to do the homework on their cell phone. Come on, it's very difficult. So that's where the line of demarcation is, right there, because it's between the have and the have-nots, and it's even more prominent now, or prevalent, if you will, during these COVID times because of that. And people always say, well, we got to work out school system going remote. Yeah, they're going remote, but it doesn't necessarily mean the kid at home has the necessary equipment to engage, or the throughput, from an internet speed perspective, to engage in a real time manner. So we're still struggling. There are a lot of foundations and school systems trying to get outside help, if you will, to make sure we can help everyone, but it's still a challenge and a struggle.
Yeah. Damon, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. And by the way, I am rolling the quiz. That's actually what's wrong.
Oh, thank you. I apologize for that rough looking. I literally just launched it a few days ago. So he's talking about beta testing. That's a SSG Joker. I was not kidding, where it's like, you're always in beta testing. You always got to try new stuff. So it's all an experiment, baby. I have a lot of thoughts on that, but it really comes down to us realizing that that people in America are always in different places. And it's not necessarily just people of color. It's also people of different class structures, right? Mm-hmm. I have a friend who was a tech writer, and he lived at the time up in New England. He was a tech writer, same level as I was, because I was writing for Playboy and a lot of the major guys. And he was complaining because he still needed to do his work on dial-up. Dial-up. Some of y'all are familiar with dial-up, right? Where it's like the AOL on and makes the noise, and then right. I'm just old enough to remember that when I was a kid, and so like the old school modems before we had broadband, and so he was still dealing with that like 10, 15 years ago. And this guy, I think he was a 6-figure writer, so he was doing well, but because of where he lived, it was too rural for that. So those issues have been plaguing us for years, and so. And I talk about this in Build From Now. Again, I'm in the middle of writing the manuscript right now. And I talk about that where I'm like, there's nothing new that's happened this year. Like not one iota. Whether it's George Floyd, whether it's the political issues, if you want to call them that. I'm being nice here. The political issues, whether it's the poverty and the scarcity, the so-called invisible workforce that has been running our country for years and running the companies too. So that was a good Freudian slip there. But this has always been happening. There's nothing new under the sun. So what we have is, as people are calling it, this kind of our reset year. So how are we going to deal with that? So I agree 100% with that digital divide. And I never heard of digital equity. I love that term. Mm-hmm. So that idea of digital equity, that's been on the table for years. I was writing about it for ARP years ago in regards to older citizens. That was like 10, 15 years ago when I was writing about that. So it's not like I have this vision. It's more like, no, this has been an issue for a very long time. And so I think now is the opportunity to address that. People want to go ahead and reset to the way it was before. And I always correct people when they say that. They're like, let's get back to normal. And I'm like, no. I think all of you on the call understand that. It's like, we're not trying to go back to normal. No. So that's my last word on that. But
Louisa, I'd love to hear your takes on the digital divide as well. Because like I said, I know you've been an author and you're definitely involved in the world of trying to get your word out and the word of kindness and all of that. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the digital divide also.
Yeah, just to piggyback on both what Errol and Damon have said is, especially in regards to education, is that even though schools may provide the computers or whatnot, but what do you have at home that's going to allow you to connect? And so, it's hard. It's not just a color thing, as Damon mentioned. It's a class thing, and if I have this nice computer at home, but I have no Wi-Fi. I have no internet. So how am I supposed to log in and do the work? And the libraries are on limited openings because of COVID. So I can't just go to the library and sit there and get it done because they're not all open right now. And so, it's just about making sure that we can give our kids the tools necessary. And so if that means, parking outside of a McDonald's and siphoning off their Wi-Fi, then that's what it means. You have to do what you have to do in order to get the work done, even though they say, well, we've provided all of these tools. We've provided all of this information. Yes, but you're not paying for this internet bill. Like you're not paying for this bill that they don't have because they can't afford to have that. And it's hard, like Errol mentioned earlier, to do something on your cell phone when you have all of this information that you're trying to get out. So I think that, schools are doing what they're trying to do in order to make it happen, but they also have to be understanding and have to figure out a way to help those students who don't have all the resources that other students have. And that could be within the same classroom. And so it's not necessarily a race thing. It's definitely a class thing. Like in that same classroom, you could have a person who has that T1 data and they are on it and whatever. And then you have that person who has nothing. And so how are we going to help all of the kids? And that's something that the school system has to figure out. And like we alluded to earlier, the whole idea of school and the whole idea of this digital age that we're in now, everything needs to be reformed. Everything needs to be transformed because it's not working. It's not working for us, how the school system is set up. And this pandemic has put a spotlight on that more than it was before.
Yeah, definitely SSG Joker, if you could. Like you said, you had gone to school and you kind of pulled out and everything. So I was wondering how you were feeling about even using computers and everything in terms of like trying to make your music and all of that. Because I know a lot of times we do need that technology in order to even make the music. But I was wondering if you were finding enough access for even the things that you want to do.
Well, certain things are definitely rougher because of, especially with the virus that's going on right now, it's kind of made things rougher. I do make a lot of my music through my computer here at home, but also I need to get in the studio and things like that. But I found that it's not necessarily hard. I've been blessed to where I can have all the tools that I need to get what I need done. I know necessarily not everyone does, especially in the education system. Kids don't have necessarily the tools they need. I know teachers don't take excuses. I know when I was in high school and stuff like that, teachers don't take excuses. If they want something, they're gonna need it that day. You know, you could say, "Oh, I don't have a printer." Well, everybody has a printer. You can say, "Oh, I don't have a laptop." It has a laptop, and some of them just don't understand that. But luckily, I was blessed to where I was able to. I was never in a situation to where I would have to, you know. I had everything I need, and I have everything I need now. So, I mean, I don't really have anything to say that wasn't, already said. But I would just say that I'm lucky enough to have everything I need.
Gotcha. I want to come back to something we talked about earlier, and you brought it up again, Damon, which is this whole concept of the gig economy. And I know that the gig economy has, like I said, right now become very popular because a lot of folks have moved away from their mainstream of income, sometimes by force, because there's been a number of folks that have been furloughed or laid off or a number of other things. So they're oftentimes having to find a job in the gig economy. So what kind of advice would you give to folks that are trying to work in the gig economy, and how sustainable do you think the gig economy is in this era? Because like I said, I've noticed that a number of my friends are working now in that gig environment because of having been laid off from jobs, been fired from jobs, done a number of other things because of what we're going on with the pandemic. So it seems to me that we're even more in a gig economy now than we've ever been. So I'd love to hear your reflections on that and what advice you would give to folks that are trying to break into the gig work.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you're absolutely right. I was living in San Francisco when Uber started and other companies, and I was a couple of degrees away from the founders. So I remember seeing a lot of that. So I've seen that growth over 12, 13, 14 years. So I think it's really important for anyone that's getting involved. It's important to understand the distinction between the gig economy and entrepreneurship. Those are kind of two different things. So entrepreneurship is, I'm going to create something from scratch. I own it. I'm going to set my own hours, how little, how big or whatever. And if someone says, hey, your stuff is hot, I want to buy it, then it comes through me. Or if someone says, I want to acquire your company, as happened to me several years ago, then it's like, cool. And you sign off on it, you get the check or whatever the case may be. That's entrepreneurship. The gig economy is different. The gig economy is saying, I will work as a contractor and set my own hours based on the boundaries that are set by a company. But that also means that the company at any time could stop your services. And that also means that they could change the details of it. I know that's been an issue, particularly in the ride-sharing economy, right? With Lyft and with Uber and even some of the other guys that are a lot smaller that are popular in the Bay Area. They suddenly were changing their policies. People were up in arms in it, but then they weren't completely independent. and they didn't have a union, which is what they're fighting for, and as we speak in California. So they didn't have that power. And so if you're doing the gig economy, I would highly recommend that you have some type of strategy to have other sets of passive income that are totally based on you. I think there's also a reflection of social media versus creating your own community. And so I have a newsletter. You see it on my thing. It's joindamon.me. It comes out every Wednesday at 5:55 a.m. I don't miss a newsletter. It's my way of connecting with my community. It's my email list. If I have my new book coming out, they know about it first. If I have the quiz, which I just shared with you, Mark, you've been sharing online, they know about it first. They pre-order my stuff. They know what's going on. I actually left Facebook about a year ago. I shut down my account after being on Facebook for, 13, 14 years. And that was because with all the stuff that was happening with Facebook, I couldn't trust them to have me connected to my community. The gig economy is the same way. And so know what you're getting into with the gig economy and know that that spigot can turn off at any time. At the same time, take whatever money you have from the gig economy and invest it in yourself. You know, like with SSG Joker, I'm pretty sure you own all your music. You haven't signed, right? I see the nod, right? Right? I know you know. So it's like, so he doesn't have a record deal. So it'll be easier for him to get quick money right now and go ahead and say, yeah, I'm going to go and work with this company. But then if the company changes policy or owners, then you're based on whatever contract you have. Now you can have that particular relationship, but then you also need to have something that's completely 100% your own. And so that's part of that's pretty much all the work that I do is helping people that want to have their own. So just like, recommending that you don't quit your day job could end tomorrow. The gig economy could end right now. There are people who are, underwater with their houses because they relied on Airbnb. That's a gig hustle. So anytime they could be like, no, we're not going to do it like that because of the COVID thing. But if they were just renting their house on their own, then they wouldn't have that same issue. And so I think if you're going to do the gig economy, know what you're getting into. Do not mix it up with the independent entrepreneurship hustle. I would recommend you do both. And just take that gig money that comes every Friday or whatever, if you're doing Uber or through Instacart or whatever, take that money and then invest in your own stuff. So again, I've done whole keynotes on this, so I'm trying not to go on a rant, but I think it's so important to understand that distinction, No,
and I definitely agree that that's an important distinction to know and everything. I actually wanted to come to something that Errol talks about in his one of his web pages, and I'm actually going to put that on there just like I got Louisa's web page going right now. But I know that one of the things that you talk about in your page is about diversity and things of that nature. So I would love to hear your reflections on how we're doing in the whole thing of diversity and equity in terms of the business community, because I know that that's something that you address, Errol, in your business and everything of that nature. So, of course, we will also put down the information about the Sports Shop Radio, but I know that I Follow Leadership is about equity and a number of other things that you've got going on as well. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about what you're doing in that field.
Well, that's interesting. We obviously, like most things, DI, which is a new name for diversity and inclusion. That's a hot item now. I mean, it is hot like you've never seen it before, and to the extent where we're working with a company called Wild West, where we have a segment on the show that talks about diversity and inclusion. Say in terms of like we have this little bit where we say this and not that, because by saying this may affect when you say that. So we just try to include, let people know. And some people, there are some people, regardless of what background you're from, you may be aware of certain things that may offend other people, and you may not be aware of certain things that offend other people. So we go do a bit by saying that. Also, it's important to talk about the diversity and inclusion in this sense. You guys may be surprised, and it may have changed, but I doubt it, not that much. That was probably thousands of morning sports talk radio shows in the country. Thousands of sports talk radio shows in the country. If you were to ask me how many are hosted by African Americans, solely African Americans, and I would tell you probably about 2.
Wow.
In the entire country. And you're listening to a guy that owns one of those. That may surprise you. I mean, and it goes back to, you don't think African Americans, black people can talk about sports? We dominate sports. So don't you think it's important that you have non-white people talk about that at some point so we can talk about the way we see it to include us in this whole process? So, I mean, and that's at a sports level, but it exists in corporate America. In other places as well. I'm sure Damon could talk about that. But yeah, we go our way to mention what kind of conversation you have, in the break room, and how does it flow when you say this, not that kind of scenario. So that's a little bit we do.
Louisa, what do you have to say about that? Because like I said, you are also a person that does a lot of speaking and does things of that nature, just like Damon does. And so I'm sure that you're also finding that not enough black women are in those spaces that you're visiting and things of that nature. So I'd love to hear your reflections as one that is a person that is doing public speeches and also a publisher, because I don't think there's enough of our voices necessarily in the author world as well. So I'd love to hear your reflections on where we are with diversity in publishing and in public speaking.
Agreed. There's not a lot. And Damon alluded to this earlier about building your own table. And so, it's good to be invited to the table, but a lot of people don't get invited, right? And so if you're not invited to that table, that doesn't mean that you don't have anything to say. That just means that they don't value your voice, but your voice is still valuable. And you have to find those spaces where you can use that value and let people know what's going on. If that's creating your own space. And in the time that we're in now, we can do live streams. We can do different things to put our voices out there. But to have to be invited to the conferences and on shows or whatnot, there's not a lot of Black women being allowed to do that. And it's unfortunate because of what we have a lot to say, and there's a lot to be said. And so, but don't let that stop you. Keep showing up. Keep doing your part, whether that's on your own social media or finding different ways to get your voice out there. Because regardless of if they find you valuable or not, you are valuable and your voice needs to be heard. So don't let the closed door stop you. Go and open your own door and figure out how to get it out there.
Yep, definitely agree with you on that. Definitely got to find new ways to open doors and things of that nature, because I agree that we don't see enough of that going on. And I know sometimes we're also afraid to speak out because we're afraid of the consequences if we're in corporate America and things of that nature. So I'm going to come back to Damon, and I do know that that's something that happens as well, is that sometimes folks might have these great ambitions. You were actually one that was willing to step out on I would use the term a wing and a prayer and things of that nature, but definitely not everybody has those kind of gumptions, but they have these great visions. They have these great ideas. They might even have the next Cutler out there. So what kind of advice do you give to folks in order to encourage them to develop their passion? Because I do feel that there are a number of folks that have great passion, but sometimes they self-defeat themselves. That's the best way I can describe it. And I've used that description on this show before, is that sometimes we don't even get in the game before we've already eliminated ourselves out of the game. So what is some of the ways that you get people out of that mindset?
Yeah, so there's two things that immediately come to mind. First of all is respect where you are. Like I talked about, I sold my second startup, Cuddler. We got the check for it, which was great because we bootstrapped it, again, as far as owning your own. VCs, venture capitalists weren't trying to hear it. An app that connects you over hugs. People are like, what are you talking about? And then we end up going to the top of the app store. And then after we sold it, my son had just turned 2. Again, I'm the primary caretaker. My son had just turned 2. My second son was going to come shortly after that. And I was like, okay, I need to come up with my new idea. I need to come up with my new hustle. What's the next startup I'm going to do? Like, I was just on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. I need to have my next act. Like, I was antsy for the first time, probably in my life, worried about what my next thing was going to be. And a good friend of mine from Silicon Valley, we ended up having coffee. And she was like, what if your family right now is your startup? Like, what if that's what you're supposed to focus on? Now, I've always been dedicated to my kids and focused on them, but she's basically saying you only have so much bandwidth right now. Your kid is just turned 2. You have another one on the way. Maybe this isn't the time to do another startup. And so I think the first thing is, again, what I talk about in the new book, Build From Now, recognize where you are. And so maybe you're not moving forward on your thing because you don't have the bandwidth for it. Again, Mark, like the test you took, maybe you don't have that particular focus right now, or you're not agile enough to get around certain things going on in your life. Maybe you don't have the time, or maybe you simply don't have the energy because you got 2 kids at home. And so number one, recognizing where you are. Maybe this isn't the season for it. But then the second piece of advice is that if it's not the season for it, at least you can start. And so, Louisa, you got into this where, I took myself to the TED conference for the first time. It's like, so I got invited to go, and I got my behind on a plane and got over there, paid for the hotel, the whole thing. I didn't know I was going to be an entrepreneur at the time. It was way before entrepreneurship. But it was way before I even professionally started public speaking. But I know I had to be in that room. So I put in those resources. That's what I could do at that time. I couldn't become a public speaker. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I had to be in that room. So I invested in myself. With SSG Joker, with you, like, you're doing that video you showed is based on your resources right now. If you and I connect a year from now, you'll probably be in a different place. We connect 10 years from now, or when you're in my position, 20 years from now, you're going to be on another planet. You're going to be in another universe, but you're doing things based on the resources you have now. The people that I coach, the people that I see that conferences and stuff who are frustrated, it's because they're expecting this much growth in this amount of time. Mm. And the biggest advice I give to folks, I should put bumper stickers out. You guys might have given me an idea where it's like, stretch your timeline. So whatever you're doing, do it as best as you can with taking a little steps, whatever you got. And then if you're planning on having your business up and running in a year, make it 3 years. See how that feels, because you might have to focus on other things in your life. People get frustrated because they worry about trying to do things in this short period of time. Otherwise, they're going to be a failure. And for me, again, when my kids came, I couldn't hustle every single day. When I did my startups, I had to find time at night or super early in the morning, as I talk about in my books. And that's what I could do at the time. And so I'd say working with whatever you can do right now is 100% better than just giving up because you can't do it exactly how you want to do it right now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One of the things, and I'm curious to hear what everybody on the panel has to say about this, but I've got a good friend, and actually I think Errol may know him as well because they're here in the Durham area, but we oftentimes talk about folks that are in the entrepreneurship space, those that are in the entertainment space, those that are in a number of other spaces, but they are oftentimes have folks that oftentimes want to use their resources and actually use their resources, but not necessarily pay them what they're worth. And what my friend Ray calls it is the brain drain. So there are a number of folks that are out there trying to brain your drains and not necessarily give you the rewards that you need and all of that. So I'll start with Errol, and I was wondering what his reflections are as to how he deals with that, because there are oftentimes a number of times that folks will want to use your resources, and that can be either your personal resources, like the connections that you have, your number of other things, and then when it comes time to get that check, they can't be fined for the check. So, like I said, I was wondering how you deal with that, and then I'd like to hear from the rest of the panel about what you deal with the brain drain.
Well, that's an interesting question. I got two reactions to that, actually. One is that on the business side, in terms of when I was really still involved in the tech community and also in the sports media radio community. But my rule of thumb is this. I think if you give, it comes back twofold, in my opinion. I think someone was willing to share with me in order for me to get where I am now and, pay it forward or play it forward, whatever you want to say. I think it's important. But there have been times when sometimes people kind of forget from which they've come from, where they started. And that's fine too. But it's happened many times. People utilize your resources in your office and time, and give them space. And when they blow up, they somewhat have selective memory, I call it. But and that's fine too. But my overall rule, as I said earlier, is that I think when you give, it comes back twofold. And I'm a giving kind of person, and I think I've received some blessings in my life because of my generosity, and I think I'll probably continue to be that way.
Makes sense. What about you, Damon, when you hear folks that are trying to use your resources but not necessarily wanting to give you the rewards? I know that TEDx speeches can't be all that cheap to do, so I'm imagining that those are ones where you actually get the reward, but I'm also imagining that there are times that folks try to get you to speak for give you the knowledge but not necessarily give you the rewards.
Well, you know what? You actually don't get paid for TED Talks.
Right, you don't. Right.
So let me throw that out. So yeah, people get confused about that, which I respect. And until I got into the game, I didn't know that. But it's you don't get paid for that. But it ends up being, of course, the payment of being able to say that you're a TED speaker and then getting your message out there. And if you're about the service, then you do your thing. One of the best pieces of advice I got was from a friend of mine named Jenny Blake. She has a book called Pivot, and highly recommended. She spoke at one of the major conferences that I go to, and then we became friends after that. But again, it's about pivoting often from corporate to the independent hustle. So again, we're kind of kindred spirits. What she talked to me about was something I call the 2020. And so if someone ends up setting up an appointment with me, then I'm like, cool, let's do a 45-minute appointment and we'll do a 2020. That means you have 20 minutes to talk with me about whatever you're going through and how I can support. And then you give me 20 minutes to talk about whatever I'm going through and how you can support. And, 80% of the people will be like, nah, I'm good. Because they don't necessarily realize, because they're not far enough along, or perhaps they've had more what they call transactional relationships versus deeper relationships, right? I see you nodding your head. You understand where some people are like, I need to extract this from you. You're a TED speaker. I need to learn how to be a TED speaker. All right, thank you. Let me move on to the next thing I'm trying to get done. That's not the dynamic I have with anyone in my life. And so for me personally and professionally, it's like, okay, if we're doing 20 minutes, we're doing 2020. That means if you have someone in your network, or if I'm trying to get word out about my new book, if I'm trying to keynote over here, and you have some type of game, as they say, to give me, then we're going to be exchanging. And so it's just right from the outset, we know what the deal is. And I found that as soon as I set up that framework several years ago, then there's been less of, brain drain? There's been less of that. And I've been really thankful for that, because that does take a lot of energy. I tend to be a giving person. That's my service, is giving whatever I have in my toolbox to people who need it and helping all of us get to the next level. But there's been some lopsided folks too who don't necessarily look at things the same way. So I think it's important to come up with systems that kind of protect you from that.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about you, Louisa? Anything that you had along those kind of experiences, and how did you deal with them?
Yeah, you've got to put the value on your time, right? And so whether if what Damon just said, well, a lot of things is transactional, wherein it should be relational, and how we can help each other. And so, yeah, a lot of people want to pick your brain about a lot of stuff, and I'm okay. I'm open to doing that, but then I'm also open to, let me pick your brain too, so we can figure this out together. But you have to place value on your time, and sometimes that's saying no, and being okay with the answer is no, and not allowing those other feelings to get involved with it, because I, like all of us have said, am very giving, but at the same time, I have to put boundaries up as well so that I can protect my space and my peace in order to keep putting out good content and not feeling like people are just leeching on and using the information that I have. Not that I don't want to share it, but I can share it, and I can also put value on my time as well. And so you've got to be able to recognize that, and recognize the people who just want to leech off and not want to have that relationship. They just want to drain you, as you've said. And so, but I just wanted to tell SSG Joker, I've been texting my nieces under the table here, because they are huge rap fans, right? So I sent them the link to No Love. I was like, hey, check this out. Let me know what you think. I'm on a call right now. I need to, some feedback. They said that your flow is nice, that you're very convincing. And I want to make sure I get the words right. You're very convincing, meaning that they believe that you're already a rapper, that you're already, you've already been in the game for a very long time, and they like the beat. But the constant is that your flow is nice. And so, and that's from people who, not because they're my nieces, but because I know that they are true rap heads. Like they believe that they can come on a show and talk about rap all day long, right? And so, so I just wanted to give you some feedback on that and let you know that you're going in the right direction. Keep going, don't stop, and just keep putting out that good content.
I was going to hear from SSG Joker about his idea about folks that might be using him in the music business, but I was going to say that artist Savvy Jackson, who's out of the West Coast as well and is involved in that whole music community, if I remember correctly, out of Washington, but he was saying that you, Louisa, reminded him of his auntie. So he said,
Thank you. Thank you. I love that because that title, like I have a bunch of titles, but the title of aunt is very prevalent in my life. It's very huge. And I really appreciate that. That touched me. Thank you very much.
No problem. Wanted to share that with you. SSG Joker, has there been times that folks have tried to either get you to perform or do other things where you felt that they were doing that brain drain or that using kind of thing, and how did you deal with that?
I've had a couple experiences where people have tried to, use my resources, and I didn't really get anything back from it. And it's kind of just a thing where you have to sometimes you just have to lose, and that's just what happens. You have to lose and learn from those experiences, and you have to learn to, to be able to express that your worth, and that you're not willing to compromise that, for any reason. And even though I'm a nice person, I'm a very giving person. I don't like to tell people no. I don't like to turn people down. But it's something that you just have to learn to not be able to willing to compromise your morals and compromise things that that you stand for, and compromise. You have to be able to say, hey, this isn't worth my time. Hey, shut up. You have to be able to say,
Dog wants to make a cameo appearance.
It happens.
Make a cameo appearance as well. But while SSG Joker is getting the dog in order and everything, I was going to actually bring another point in as we get ready to wrap up the show in a few minutes and everything. But one of the things that I had the pleasure, and I know that Errol knows this person as well, but there is a Black Expo here in this area, which is the thing that Eric Kelly, who is a local gentleman, does. And he was talking about the state of Black enterprise and the state of the Black economy. And I've heard figures that it could be as many as 50 to 75% of those could be closing. We know the restaurant businesses are in trouble and a number of other businesses are in trouble. So I'd love to hear your reflections. Like I said, if SSG Joker comes back, I'll get him in the conversation as well. But the three of you that are still on, I'd love to hear your thoughts about the state of our economy, because I know that the entire economy is in trouble, but it seems like we're in even more trouble. So I'd love to hear your reflections on that. And I'll start with you, Errol.
Wow, that's a big question. We, I'm of the opinion that we had issues even prior to the pandemic as it relates to that space, and the pandemic only amplified it more in the negative way in terms of where we are as Black businesses, Black-owned businesses. One of the things that's a challenge is that we have to continue to try to market and instill in people that look like us that Black businesses are, they do good work too. And when we provide an opportunity to Black businesses, of course, a Black business needs to provide that service. So I think we're in trouble in this area. I think after the pandemic, there are going to be some heroes, and there's going to be some people who are still trying to come up out of this pandemic over the next several years. And in my opinion, again, I hope and pray that I'm wrong, I think Black business is definitely one of the areas that we got to really pay attention to and give as much help as we can, because it's almost like a dying breed. and it's amplified right now by the pandemic.
Definitely. Damien, what are your thoughts on that as well? And by the way, artist Savvy Jackson, who did add that he is from Washington, was asking maybe we could use a Black business phone book. So that was one of his suggestions that we have and things of that nature. But what are your thoughts about how we're going to do after this pandemic? Because like I said, I've heard that, like I said, it could be as many as 25% or more of the restaurants could be under. And then, like I said, 50% of the African-American, and I would argue other minority businesses as well. So 50 to 75% is figures that I've heard.
Yeah, I've heard similar statistics, unfortunately. And so unfortunately, I've heard that too. I wish it wasn't the truth, but it seems to be going that direction. I did a keynote over the summer where I talked about side hustles, and which is one of my specialties, kind of like the passive income / having your own thing. And one of the things that I talked about is how my fathers, I have a stepfather and I have a biological father, were both independent. And then my stepfather's father was also independent over on the East Coast. In fact, he's from Raleigh, Durham, believe it or not. And so he owned businesses up on this eastern seaboard and then going over to South Jersey, which is where I'm originally from. And the thing is that, especially for my grandfather, who was born in 1930 or something, he was dealing with the remnants of Jim Crow. His father's father was probably a slave. So I think the stuff that we're dealing with now, I think even though it's grim and it makes me feel very, very sad, we also need to understand that as a people, particularly people of color, and even people in the LGBTQ community, any groups that have been repressed, they're used to dealing with bigger stuff. And so I think that's what we need to do is gather together and support each other in different ways. I have a major media project that I'm going to be announcing later on this year. And I'm actually working with a female woman of color. And that was a choice. So I already wrote a check to her business to work on my media project. And I didn't have to. That's it. Not even like virtue signaling or saying I'm doing great. It's just we all need to do that. Like those opportunities are there. We know a whole bunch of people who do amazing things. I mean, Mark and I actually connected through LinkedIn, through our mutual friend Shree, and so we have the opportunity to connect to all these different things. We just need to open our eyes. So instead of buying something from Amazon, no offense to Amazon, but instead of buying from them, why don't you buy it from the local brother or sister who lives down the street? It might take a couple more days, but, you're actually supporting that business. So we can't, I guess what I'm saying, I don't mean to y'all specifically, but just America in general, we can't say this is really sad that the Black businesses are closing when we're not supporting our brother and sister who live down the street. Like, I'm a big coffee drinker. I went and paid premium to get my favorite coffee from people of color back in San Diego where I used to live. I paid for the shipping and the whole thing. But I know that coffee that I have every morning is helping keep their family business alive.
That's right.
We have those choices every single day.
That's right.
And it's like we can do anything. And if we look at our history, we have done everything. We've gone through stuff way rougher than this. And so in my recent research, it was hitting me. I'm like, even my own family. Like, I got my 2 kids at home, and my wife's trying to do her stuff from home and then work at her office and all that. And I barely have any time. I'm like, what I'm going through is nothing compared to my grandfather that's from Raleigh, Durham, like the stuff he was going through when he was a kid down there, or his parents. And so understand that we have that resiliency and leading on that part and going from there,
No, I definitely agree with you on that and everything. Louisa, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. One thing I would add to what Damon said is that a lot of times we don't even think about our historical elements and things of that nature because we're here in Durham, North Carolina, which is the home of one of the Black Wall Streets. Definitely there is the one in Tulsa. And, of course, there have been a couple of other ones around the country. But unfortunately, I think that too often our own kids don't even know about that history or about that knowledge and things of that nature. So definitely that's something that we have to do a better job of is even teaching about our own legacy. Because I know even my own grandmother was one of the founders of the Black Library in Raleigh. So I don't think that we oftentimes talk about those kind of things and everything. But Louisa, I'd love to hear from you about your thoughts about the state of Black business.
Yeah, and we don't talk about that because we weren't taught that, and we don't learn that in school. And so we need more of that type of education. But we're in a tough situation, and a lot of people are going to lose during this. However, that does not mean that they can't come out on the other side rebuilding. And there's going to be a lot of rebuilding happening. And so, yes, there will be restaurants that close. Yes, Black businesses are going to close. Like, these are facts. These are not, and I hate to put it on them, but it is going to happen. But what do you do next? And you, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as someone who counts on that as income, need to start thinking about what's next, because it is going to happen. And Madam C.J. Walker became a millionaire during a pandemic. Yes. And so, what I'm saying, like, there are other things Damon has mentioned several times about the side hustle. And so, yeah, your main business, your restaurant, whatever your Black business is, may fail, but you can also do something else. Now, is it going to be easy? No, it's definitely not going to be easy. Not during this economic times. But again, and I keep bringing this up, Madam C.J. Walker became a millionaire within 9 years. She started her business. 9 years later, she was a millionaire during a pandemic. And so it's possible. But you have to have the drive, and you have to have the vision to pivot. And, pivot gets overused sometimes, but it's key. You have to be able to pivot in order to be successful on the next level, and take this L. And it's unfortunate, and I do not say that lightly. I'm not saying take this L lightly, but take this L, use that as a stepping stone to the next great thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We got just a few more minutes before we get ready to wrap up this show, and then I've got to join and do the other show that I do on this network and everything, because I do two of them on a Monday afternoon. So I'll actually send y'all the link, and if y'all want to join me on that one, you're more than welcome to join that conversation as well. But that's the Mullins Music and Memories. But that being said, I also wanted to let folks know one of the ways that we always wrap all of our shows pretty much is we give folks a chance to give their words of wisdom, their words of encouragement, their words of positivity. And that's just something that I've been doing on this show for a number of months now. So I'll start with you, Errol, and then come down to Damon, and then close out with Louisa. Any words of encouragement or thoughts that you would like to share with folks that they might want to carry with them as they're going back, either watching this show now, or that they might watch it back on YouTube or on Facebook or on LinkedIn, Twitter, or a number of our other sources that this is going out on. So definitely any words of wisdom that you'd like to share.
Well, just two quick things. Don't be afraid to fail. We all do it. We're going to do it again. We've done it before. Nobody's perfect. And you just got to get there and make it happen. My last point, I said already, your network is your net worth, and how you utilize that at every level, elementary school, high school, college, 60 years old, it doesn't matter. So keep those two thoughts in mind. And Mark, let me thank you again for inviting me. Great meeting, Louisa, as course, and Damon. You guys have been fantastic. Great meeting you guys.
Hey, thank you.
Damon, your words of wisdom and positivity that you want to share with folks?
Sure. The biggest thing that I've been learning and been working towards is that whatever we have right now isn't fixed. So this pandemic will end. The question is, where do you want to end up when you look up and the pandemic's over? So a lot of the people that I work with are saying, okay, well, this is the way it's going to be. And how am I going to do public speaking if we can't travel? And how am I going to do my business if I don't have physical customers and so forth? And all these different levels to it. And I think one of the challenges is us having the vision. Oh, sorry. And I'm doing the comic book. Okay, very good. I'll take a look in a second. That's and not the comic. Okay. Thank you, Audie. That was my 4-year-old making a cameo. And so one of the things that we don't realize is that where we are a year from now isn't going to be the same as where we are now. If you think about where we were a year ago, just pause on that. What were you doing in the middle of last October? I was flying all over the country, speaking. A little bit different now. I could not have predicted what's going on now. So what you need to do is build the systems that you didn't have the time to build before. And I think that goes back to the Black businesses where, with respect to my Black brothers and sisters, sometimes we get sloppy with the systems and we just want to get stuff up. If you have your systems in place, then you have a contingency if the customers stop coming. If you have different passive income streams, then your things won't dry up when your main income ends. The pandemic, if it's a pandemic, it could be war tomorrow. It could be a presidential election in a few weeks. And who knows what's going to happen? You don't know. And so this is your time to prepare for 2021. And so just prepare. Don't assume, don't be sad about how things are now. Build towards the future. And if you're looking back 6 months from now, you're looking back to right now, what would you wish you have done?
That makes a lot of sense. And by the way, you'd be glad to know that that's not the first time a kid has made a cameo appearance. We actually do a Gamers Den, and to Toby McDuffie, who's one of our main hosts of that, he has as well. And his kid oftentimes will make surprise appearances on that show, which is every Thursday afternoon at 1:00. So we're used to kids popping in. Actually,
I have to say, there are always surprise appearances. Let me just put that out there.
Definitely. Louisa, what are your thoughts about your final thought and any words of encouragement that you'd like to give?
Yeah, and my final thought is that we all belong to each other. And what I mean by that is that we're in this together, all of us, not just certain groups, not just Democrats, Republicans, not just Black people, white people. We are all in this together. And when we realize that we belong to each other, we can do more together than not. Then we can start seeing some true change in this world. And also know that everybody has stuff. Everybody is going through something. The stuff is different for each person, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's any less. Everybody is going through stuff. So when you see somebody showing up in a negative way, or somebody coming at you sideways, or somebody cutting you off in traffic, or whatever the case may be, you don't know why they are doing what they are doing the way they are doing it, because you have no idea what they have going on behind the scenes in their life, or why that person just cut you off. They could be racing down the street trying to reach a dying family member before it's too late. We have no idea. So if we can just have some empathy and some grace for each other and realize that we do belong to each other, then this world could change, but we have to start with ourselves. You cannot change anyone. You have no power over anyone. All you can do is work on you and then show up in the world and allow people to see how you are showing up in this world.
Well, I want to thank all of you, including SSG Joker, who had to bounce off, for being on the show with me and everything. Like I said, y'all were some tremendous guests. Errol, you'll be glad to know that one of the things they've been talking about on IBM.TV is getting a sports show. So I might have to have a conversation with you.
I would love to do that
in the near future and everything. That's something they've been talking about. So I will definitely raise that idea of having you involved in that. And of course, Louisa and Damon, y'all are always welcome to come back and join me on any conversation. Like I said, I will send you the link for the other afternoon show, but I know y'all have been busy. You've got to take care of kids, Damon, and everything. So if you can't,
they're looking for me now.
Maybe their time, and I definitely understand that. But I'm going to close with our theme music and everything. But I do want to thank all of you for being on. It was a tremendous conversation. I think the folks learned a lot. They definitely got some insight as to things that are going on in our world around education and a number of other things. So once again, I want to thank all four of you for being my guest on this show this afternoon.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Mark. It's nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you guys too.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.